Today we've got Future Forward, a show in 3 acts.
Act 1, privacy. Do you have it? Do you want it? And what is it going to cost?
Then Act 2, virtual reality. We've got 12 can't-miss projects from the Columbia Digital Storytelling Lab.
And then Act 3, hungry? Well, you better be, because we're about to take on the future of food.
I'm Steve Rosenbaum.
And I'm DeRose.
And this is Future Forward. And welcome, Gene. Hey, how are you this week?
I'm pretty good. How are you doing?
You know, I'm feeling strangely optimistic about the future. I think we've got good, chewy stuff to talk about, and I'm feeling slightly less gloomy. Not sure entirely why, but maybe because I put food at the end.
Yeah. Well, I do know that you're going to TED this week, so maybe you'll come back with some good futurist optimism.
You know, every year is different, and I always tell people what you get from TED is what you bring to it. So I think you're right. You know, probably showing up in Vancouver optimistic is a good thing.
Right.
So let's start with privacy. You know, I think it's interesting. Do you worry about privacy? I mean, is that something that like eats at you?
I worry about it. I try not to make silly mistakes myself as an individual, and try to keep my kids and my family in line. But I've had a long-held belief going all the way back to .com days that what people say about privacy and then what they're willing to drop their drawers and let happen if something's going to be free are two different things.
Yeah. So you know, obviously the reason we're opening the show on privacy this week is because Zuckerberg is going to be in front of Congress, and is going to be on all the talk shows, and it's going to be Facebook Privacy Week, and you know, I think I'm trying to be empathetic. There's part of me that wishes he would just say, "Are you guys fucking kidding? Like, really? Like, you're surprised?" Like, of course he can't. He has to be very... He's going to put on a suit and tie, which is going to be weird. I mean, do you think we're going to learn anything?
Well, there are going to be specifics in what they do, but will they be meaningful, and will they come off of their Pollyanna attitude? A preview was out there this week because we heard Sheryl Sandberg hit the hustings, and she was interviewed by The Times, was on NPR, did some of the news shows. And, you know, their point of view was that we were too idealistic. We trusted people. You know, we just have to get past the fact that we're such, you know, altruistic, you know, idealists about people. And that is so tiresome, because the reality is their business runs on the fine razor's edge of how much information they can get away with sharing with people, with businesses, because this is everything that Cambridge Analytica did is the kind of stuff in a different manner that's been what is de rigueur for advertisers and publishers. You know this, I know this.
You know, I'm going to disagree with you here, because I know a lot of people at Facebook. I find them to be, as a group of people, pretty good, decent, hardworking, serious people. And I just think if you Google the word fake news, it literally went from having no results in 2016, early 2000, like there was a moment that the whole holy shit, this social media thing is actually impacting the planet, kind of happened overnight. And you know, and it's a fair question that would we be as concerned if the election had gone another way?
I agree with you about that. And there's a certain character of what has been in the news and how it's been in there. But I will also say that to varying degrees, going all the way back to the 90s, you know, with AOL, and your browser and your cookies are doing things, and some of the earliest, hacks of financial information, that it's been a thing. And I want to at least concede that I'm not sure whether we disagree or it's a semantic issue. I don't know the answer as to whether Facebook, I do believe they're idealistic. But I also believe they have a certain kind of reality distortion feel, to quote someone else from the Valley, famously said about Steve Jobs, that has them not quite. It's one of these things where they're either there is cynicism and some form of evil. I don't really believe that. There's a kind of naivete, or they're really stupid. And I land in the middle because I don't think they're stupid. But I do feel like they're not aware of very obvious things when it comes to being in the media business. This comes from being in a media and an advertising business and trying to put a software face on top of it all from a business model and operations point of view. The very fact that they don't have live people talking and selling the ads in most cases is part of the problem.
Well, so here's a good point. If you ran a newspaper or you ran a television station and, a slightly nefarious Russian group of mobsters showed up with a bag of cash and said, we want to buy ads on your cable network, let's say, there would be a transaction that would take place between your sales guy and the nefarious Russian propagandist. And you'd go to your boss and go, hey, I got this bag of cash from this kind of shady guy who wants to run ads about our election. And there would be a conversation. Now, by the way, don't get me wrong. People take shady, questionable opinion ads all the time, but it's done no one does it. Once you get to these automated systems.
That's right. Self-service.
Right. Self-serve. Somebody's putting a credit card in and typing, whatever. And on the other hand, they're not reviewing it. They're reviewing it in an automated way to make sure it doesn't have too much text on the screen or doesn't have naked parts or it doesn't have curse words. But they're not really reviewing it for content.
Right.
Or whether or not you're paying in rubles or not.
Right. And we also have to chunk our way in, hack our way and unpack the nature of privacy. It used to be, because I was in the research business, that there was taking people's information and their survey data and their demographics and then just mirroring it back to the world in extended ways. You're not talking about Steve Rosenbaum's, proclivities here and there. You're just saying 45% of people are Republican or whatever.
Right.
Now, we're into a new world where there's a line between those two versus direct marketing. Right? The idea that like somebody bought the list of these names and now they're going to send emails to those people and Steve is going to get called because he's a Republican. I don't mean to be poking you there. And so this is a little different thing because you're taking incredibly sophisticated data and then going at people in incredibly sophisticated ways that kind of inevitably does go back to them. And even if it doesn't have your name on it, it's going to reach you.
So what do you make of what, Tim Cook said? I mean, Tim Cook has increasingly been pretty outspoken in this privacy fake news place and taken kind of a high-handed, we would never do that. We're the good guys here.
Yeah, I think there's a few things going on at once. One is that Tim Cook himself is famously reticent and not the type to be saying much, but when put on the spot, there's that. Then there's the second fact, which is that you can't make a direct comparison between Facebook's issues as they would be and Apple's as they would be, because you're talking about different ways of using data. And, everything that happens through iOS products. So at a superset level, they're partly to blame here. So I just think it's just a convenient way to take some pot shots. And I just, honestly, it's a distraction.
His quote was, "Privacy is a human right."
Right, and he said, and they asked him if you had been in this situation, what would you do? And he said, I wouldn't have let ourselves get into this situation. But the reality is, that's like saying, so you wanted to have a $60 billion valued company instead of a $200 billion. You can't unpack that.
So remind me, what happened to iAds? They were in the ad business and now they're out of the ad business-ish?
Well, they at first they were going to control in an overt way all ads as if there was another layer on top of and behind your app where ads would get flown through. They realized quickly they couldn't get away with that and it would just be a nightmare. But they're still controlling largely. Anyone who's tried to build an app knows that, Apple controls so much of that data and the way in which things happen, and that they're effectively making the money off of ads, not the way Google would, but they're in that business too, but indirectly.
So let's get to Europe, because this may be
Yeah.
I mean, there are a number of things I'm happy about this week, but this may be kind of near the top of the list. A big internet company that you and I both know, and I'm not going to tell you who it is, had some data of mine, and I needed it back. And I reached out to them through a contact I had, and I said, hey, I kind of need this data back. And they said, oh yeah, we're building a tool so you can have it back, because we need to do that to be in compliance with European regulators. And I went, yes.
Yeah, well, that's going to increasingly happen. I mean,
Right.
this is going to be one implication of all this, but it's been out there for a while. And, again, to me, the biggest example of this would be Amazon. If you could truly get all the data that they have on you and your records, you could put it to productive use. And in fact, you are starting to see companies that are offering consumers the ability to wield their own data as an advantage in the marketplace, whether that means they get deals or they can, let me market my data to other people at my own, but I look at LinkedIn, and I'll just say quickly, LinkedIn is one of these companies that has always had this, I can go grab my data if I want, but what you're grabbing is the most basic surface level stuff. You're not even really getting a full database of all your connections. You're just getting a list of their names and, things like that.
Yeah, I think European regulators, I guess the question I think about is, why are they so much more willing to be, I can't say authoritarian, but that's not right. Controlling, that's not right. Like, here, let me just get, why are we such pussies? Why is our government so unwilling to pay attention?
Reasons. I think there's a few reasons. First of all, Europe's historically, when it comes to tech, they're the ones that impose more onerous antitrust regulations upon Microsoft. They're the ones more onerous with Google and some of its practices. And some of this goes back a long time to other kinds of telecom antitrust. But it's a very so one thing that happens is Europe has had the ability and has had more of a willingness to act quickly and decisively. And they have a humanist and a consumer protection. They do not have a default that is libertarian, the way the U.S. has a default that is kind of libertarian in terms of managing business and commerce. Things are very, these are democratic socialists, and that itself is the reason. So you're going to have, and in a way, they're the conscience of the world when it comes to media, because Europe's too important. Adjustments will have to be made, and so sometimes the dog will wag the tail. In the Far East and in the U.S., things may not be as onerous on tech companies, but they want things to all look the same, so they'll fall in line.
All right, so stand by. We're going to watch Zuckerberg. We're going to see if he gets out of hot water or if something else happens. Moving on. The Columbia University Digital Storytelling Lab is the brainchild of my friend Lance Wheeler. It's been around for a bunch of years. And every year they have an awards ceremony. And I think I may have gone 3 years ago. I didn't go last year. I went again this year. I don't think I had any, expectations of what it was going to be. But really, I was pretty blown away this year.
Tell me about it. Like, what was is there more attention? I mean, this is something that you've attended, so I'm going to be your interlocutor here. Has it gotten bigger over the last few years, and are the things you're seeing wow, or are they feeling more close to things you might see in the marketplace?
No. More complicated, more serious, more. I mean, I guess what I got a little burned out on was feeling like a lot of the VR stuff I was seeing was just like, wow, we got a race car, it'll go fast. Like it was just it was, for a couple of years, it was just the fact that it was a race car. And this year, and maybe again, it's what I brought to the event, but I came away thinking I was seeing really, really new things.
New things that are viable, not displays of capability.
And complicated and hard.
Can you give examples of this that really kind of wowed you?
Well, there were 12 winners, and we don't have time to go through all 12 of them. So I thought I would just highlight the two that were, interestingly enough, not only the most memorable, but also the one that won the two big breakout awards. The two that they featured, and I'll show them both to you. One was actually a VR experience based on Alex Gibney, the documentary filmmaker Alex Gibney's film, 0 Days. And I don't know if you remember, but 0 Days was a film that Gibney did about Stuxnet.
Yep.
So some pretty entrepreneurial filmmakers had this idea that they could build a VR experience around Stuxnet with essentially two main characters. One being an NSA informant, and the other being Stuxnet as a character.
Right.
And I'm going to see if I can play this without turning on the audio. And how do we turn the audio? There we go.
It's a covert operation.
There we go. So it immediately caught my eye. It was very engaging. The Gibney film, Stuxnet's a little hard to conceptualize.
Right.
There are people that would tell you it is essentially the beginning of a new generation of cyber war, and that it didn't get nearly enough coverage. And maybe part of the reason it didn't get enough coverage is because it's complicated.
Sure.
But I love the idea of a documentary film with a VR kind of companion. I love Gibney's work. I love that this isn't his, to be clear, he didn't direct the VR project.
I understand.
I think co-executive produced and he worked on it. But it was produced by a group of talented VR innovators, and it's just
it's very hard to demo unless you're like kind of using the technology yourself. I mean, this is something, as most of these are, where you've got a headset on and it's a certain experience. Is there a least common denominator in that, or are they different technologies depending on what the award or the item is?
Well, interesting this year, and maybe it's a couple of the projects that were the most interesting actually had a combination of headsets on and headsets off. So the other breakthrough award winner was something called the Oracles. And the Oracles was produced by a company or a group of creatives that you may know called Punch Drunk.
Yep.
And I don't know if you've seen Sleep No More, the immersive theater experience that's downtown. But it's pretty mind-blowing and fabulous. I've seen it, and if you haven't, it's I don't remember what the tickets cost. It's not cheap, but it's so to have an immersive theater company decide that they wanted to think about VR was really interesting to me. And the Oracles is a cross-platform experience, which means it's got both a VR experience here. I'll as we talk, I'll show you a little bit of the video. It's essentially it was done for school children. It was done in the UK. It's actually done around the corner from Punch Drunk's headquarters. And they took a bunch of students. They showed them a bit of history, essentially the myth of Hercules. They started in VR, and then they walked them into an experience that essentially was the VR world made physical. And they gave them what they called enchanted objects. So they gave them physical things they held, keys and lanterns and everything I've seen in kind of cross-platform VR where there's a physical world you go into. I can't even describe to you when you pick something.
Are these technically beacons or somehow sensitive to interaction in a way that makes the experience?
Exactly correct. And as you move these objects through the experience, the experience changes and the objects change.
Yeah, I mean, what I love about that, and you really have to separate out with these things from a marketplace point of view, or even as a consumer who might want to think about where it's going. The difference between large-scale things that can be done on premises or in a certain place, and are they scalable things that could be in your home, things that are going to be cheap enough for anyone to use every day, or can be on your phone or iPad or TV experience, and that's a big line because, as you know, it's been a few decades that some pretty spectacular things are done in amusement parks and escape room kinds of environments, and Smithsonian Air Space Museum, space simulations and things like that. But using digital to get it the way these things are going, that's cool. That's
it certainly was mentioned. The whole event was emceed by Frank Rose, terrific author and also a partner at the lab, and Lance Wheeler, and they both raised they didn't say it as a concern, but they made the point that some of these physical experiences had been seen by as few as 2,000 people.
Right.
So, but I, if we're talking about real innovation, I think it's early enough days that, I think that we could debate over, some sort of stiff libation whether or not mass media and the fact that we've been able to deliver media to everybody around the globe is net a really good thing or not. I mean, it might be that deconstructing mass media is one of the things that happens here. That's okay.
Well, in a big marketplace sense too, what inevitably happens is high tech at a given time explodes into the marketplace when somebody figures out a dumb tech or a low tech way to bridge the gap so that things can be available at a mass level. And so, you always have the bleeding edge technologists almost dismissive of the things that end up going mass because it always involves trade-offs.
Now, not to loop back around to Facebook so quickly, but just to wrap up this segment, I do think that the next big shoe to drop in the VR world is Facebook Go, which I guess is now Oculus Go.
Yes. Yep. And then, by the way, with VR and with AI, artificial intelligence, what you and I know moving in and around the industry is that over the last 5 years, there's been a basic sprint to hire all the incredible talent in these fields out of deeply experimental military or educational environments where the research and the cutting edge work has been done, and bring them in to try to bring them to the masses.
But by the way, I should know this and I don't. Do you know do you have any rumors as to what the price point for Magic Leap is going to be?
I don't.
And, Facebook Go is going to be $199,
and that's
means
because if you can get it truly under 200, this is where things have opportunities to go mass.
So breakthroughs and storytelling awards, fabulous. We've got a link in the comments section where you can look at all of the projects and experience them, or experience at least the story of them, and highly encourage you to do so.
One last thing, because you were there. In experiencing it on site at the awards, did they have the ability, were there headsets and installations and ways of getting a little bit more of an experience, or were you just there and what we're going to see is the kind of things you saw as the awards were?
So there were no headsets. There was no setups. That what there was were, and this is true of a lot of VR discussions. There were videos of the story of the making of them. And then in some cases, videos of what it was like to be inside them. But no, it was all 2D presentations of 3D worlds. And ordinarily I would whine about that, except it was so good that I was okay.
Oh yeah, well it's okay to as long as it's getting accessible soon.
All right, so we began by saying, are we hungry? And the answer is we're going to talk about food. I just feel like there's a lot of things going on in, particularly in the meal kit service area. Have you used any of them?
Yeah, I have, and we're users of Blue Apron, and we like it a lot. And I could say a few things about that, but I'll say this: coming from the digital media and the software world where tangible items, and real revenues, because a lot is advertising or service or pay for it based. It's kind of blown people away a little bit in the last 3 to 5 years, that because even at their meager levels, people are buying things on a daily basis, that makes a big difference. And so I think that what really is important also is that at one level in New York City and 1 or 2 other big cities in the world, and another level the top 10 or 25 metros in in the U.S. and their kin around the world are kind of fake labs for this. If you looked at the data on New York City, most of these really powerful services have had extraordinary starts in New York City, where a person takes 6 Ubers a week, and where everyone, it's a very tight marketplace. It's not always a way of understanding where the big future opportunity is, and so there've been hundreds of seed and up to Series A in the last 3 years, and then a little bit of flatness behind it. So meal kits are great. They're part of the future. What else is there, and can these guys get broader? Do you use any of them? I'm sorry.
So I use Sunbasket.
Oh yeah.
I really like it. We do usually 3 meals a week from them.
Yep.
The only thing that I would put out as a warning flare, and then we'll talk about Plated in a minute. So
Yep.
Sunbasket has started pretty much every week, one way or another, to try and upsell me something. Hey, we've got a better class of meat, or we got an extra dessert, and they want me to check a box and pay more money. And
Yeah.
as somebody that's been in and out of venture capital, it's pretty clear to me that somebody did the math and said, we're only going to get so many customers. If we want to grow at 20% month over month, we're going to have to start getting more money from our existing user base.
Well, and I would just say that is not a good problem to have when it's compounded by the other problem, which is people tend to grow a little bit weary of these things, and there's a little kind of,
Sure.
and then they forget 4 months later, or it just loses its novelty. We're borderline right now with Blue Apron. We love it, but we've kind of run our cycle on it, and we're not sure we're going to stay with it, and I think that's as good as anything out there.
So Plated got bought by Albertsons, which kind of made me go, so the supermarket's going to now become a like I just have, like, do they have in their DNA that,
No, they need to co-opt the DNA, versus Amazon buying Whole Foods and everything behind what they'll do. They're bringing the DNA the other direction a little bit.
So let's talk about Amazon. How's it going? What do you think?
Well, look, our story as it relates to food has to do with a little kerfuffle that's been emerging in wake of the acquisition and the settling in, the integration, that will the onerous trade practices of Amazon, which is the nature of the business. Everything is about how they shade the lines of price and distribution. And in the wonderful world of locally sourced goods and thousands of people delivering, I have some friends that have worked in really deep places at Whole Foods and some of their partners. It's a slightly different world. There have to be adjustments on both sides. There's no doubt about it.
I missed the kerfuffle. What did Amazon do wrong when it pissed off its suppliers?
I don't know that anything has exactly been done yet, but there have been, we have some links that we're sending you to. There have been specific worries that there are going to be price and competition and demands. They're forcing their local suppliers to be tighter and more focused, and to be competitive with price and amounts and deliver. There's a lot of details.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's leave it at
food market, and it's a little bit of a commune feel, and if you sell it, you sell it. If you don't, you don't. Amazon would want to monitor the amount of little tiny free tasting giveaways you would give, because that's part of the margin too.
It's interesting. Well, we had a delicious show. Thank you. We're going to stay focused on the future of food, because I think the relationship between technology and last mile and delivery and drones, it's all
Yeah.
very much.
It relates a little bit to watches and monitoring and things that have to do with health. There's data and technology around food that I think has to do with a broader how technology improves wellness and people monitoring and use of personal data. So we're going to get to all that in future episodes.
So grab a bucket of popcorn. Make sure to watch all the Zuckerberg hearings, because they're going to be, or they'll be in Twitter, they'll be online, and we will be back again in a week to explore the
Give us
future.
a good report on TED too.
Absolutely. See you in a week.
Okay, bye, Steve.